I'm compelled to rise in opposition today to this resolution, which would block the EPA's Good Neighbor Clean Air Rule from being implemented. Before I talk about the real-world impacts that would result if we block this new clean air rule, I'd like to go back in time 21 years ago, when this body debated the last major update to the Clean Air Act. That day, we weren't debating how to weaken or delay our clean air laws. We were considering legislation, bipartisan legislation, that would improve our clean air laws and make them stronger. 89 senators approved the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. Republican President George Herbert Walker Bush signed them into law, and we're all the better for it. I believe that we can protect our environment and grow our economy at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other, and the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 are great examples of just that. For every dollar we spend installing new pollution controls and cleaning up our air, we've seen $30 return in reduced health care costs, better workplace productivity, and saved lives. In other words, for 4 decades, fewer people have gotten sick and missed work because of the Clean Air Act. Just last year, it's estimated that 160,000 people's lives were saved from the Clean Air Act protections that are in place today. And here's some more good news. Our economy didn't take a slide because of these protections either. Quite the opposite. Since former President Bush signed the bipartisan Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 into law, electricity rates have stayed constant, and our economy has grown by 60%. Despite the successes, more needs to be done. We know more today than we did 20 or 30 years ago about how pollution impairs our health. We know even more about how pollution travels from one state to another. We know more about how to curb that pollution in ways that make sense and are cost-effective. My state of Delaware has made great strides in cleaning up its own air pollution, investing millions in clean air technology. Unfortunately, air pollution knows no state boundaries and easily drifts from state to state. Delaware, like many East Coast states, sits at the end of what I call America's tailpipe. That means most of the pollution in Delaware isn't caused by sources in my state. It's caused mainly by sources in Ohio or Indiana or other states in the Midwest. In fact, 90% of Delaware's air pollution comes from beyond our borders. As governor of Delaware, I could have shut down our entire state economy. We would still have been out of attainment in public health standards. This is pollution we need our neighbors to clean up. And unfortunately, that hasn't always happened. Sadly, many of our upwind neighbors have not invested heavily enough in new clean air technologies. Some states have even built smaller smokestacks so the pollution would fall on neighboring states, keeping their air clean and making our air dirty. At the end of the day, downwind states can spend millions of dollars to clean up their act, but unless we require upwind states to make serious reductions, then states like mine won't get much healthier and people will continue to get sick and die. For all Delawareans and all the others who are living at the end of that tailpipe, I say enough is enough. The EPA and the courts agree. This is why the EPA has implemented this cross-state air pollution rule. This rule follows the intent and the direction of the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. It ensures that all of us do our fair share to reduce air pollution. That's the way it ought to be. Like my colleagues, I try to live my life by the golden rule, treat other people the way we want to be treated. That's why this rule is fair. My state, my neighboring states, shouldn't have to suffer because other states aren't required to clean up their act at our expense. And furthermore, if you ignore the fairness and equity arguments for the cross-state air pollution rule, it's still a no-brainer because the cost-to-benefit ratio of these new protections is overwhelming. This rule will save up to 34,000 lives this year. That's roughly the number of people that fit into Fenway Park for a Red Sox game. All these great benefits will be negated if this resolution passes. To my friends who are thinking about voting for this resolution, let me just ask you this. What if the prevailing winds of this country were blowing, instead of from west to east, from east to west? And what if those of us who live along the East Coast, from Virginia to Maine, chose to operate older, dirtier, coal-fired electric plants? And what if we built tall smokestacks that sent the harmful emissions coming from our plants upward into the air to be carried away to regions only to end up in the air breathed by people living in the areas to our west? And what if by operating these older, dirtier power plants, we lowered the cost of electricity along the East Coast while raising it for our neighbors in the Midwest? And what if by operating these older, dirtier power plants, we decrease the health care costs associated with dirty air for Americans living along the East Coast while increasing health care costs for Americans living in the Midwest? I'll tell you what they'd say. They'd say it's unfair. They'd say we shouldn't be able to get away with polluting their communities year after year. They'd say somebody should right this wrong. They'd say, haven't you heard about the golden rule that admonishes to treat all others the way we want to be treated? They'd say, enough is enough. Here are the facts. The technology exists to end this scourge of pollution. Utilities all around the country have already installed it. In doing so, they put tens of thousands of people to work, including hundreds in my home state of Delaware. The utilities have the money. We have a trained workforce that wants to do the work. We just need to act. A clean environment and a strong economy can go hand in hand. We don't have to choose between one or the other. Join me in defeating this proposal. Give your neighbors who live in my part of the country, our part of the country, give their kids, their grandparents, air to breathe that won't send them home from school or work, or off to an emergency room or into a hospital, or worse yet, take their lives. Please join me. Vote no against this motion to proceed to the resolution. Thank you, Mr. President.